turnout in every single state. And this is a Florida example as of October 1st, just to kind of walk you through how we got there. At that point in time, we expected turnout to be about 9.4 million, 9.413 to be exact. And we set all of our vote goals at 50 plus 1. And we got asked a lot of times, why did you set them at 50 plus 1? There's third-party candidates in the race. You didn't probably need that. We wanted to set it high. We wanted to set it at what we knew we would need in order if we wanted to win outright. We weren't sure exactly what the third-party candidates were going to get. They always poll higher than they show on Election Day. And so we wanted to make sure that we were giving Chris Carr and the field program a lead enough that they would be able to hold regardless of what those third-party candidates came in at. At that point in time, we had Mr. Trump's vote at about 4,047,000, meaning we were about 753,000 short of the vote goal. We needed to find, in this period of time, about a month and a couple days, we needed to find 753,000 additional votes. Again, just because we showed that we were 753,000 votes short, we weren't saying we were going to lose. We were just saying this is prescriptive analytics. We now need to come up with a path to victory. How do we find these people? And here's what we did. First of all, we started with solidifying the base. We had a large number of what we call underperformed Republicans, people that had maybe shifted 15 points in their support of the Republican Party or of the nominee from February through the end of the election, or maybe they were supporting Senator Rubio more than they were supporting Mr. Trump. And we mapped them out, and we saw that we were performing pretty well up in the Panhandle, North Central Florida, but we had room to improve down in the Southeast. So we turned these underperforming Republicans over to Chris Carr, over to the television buyers, over to the digital team, and we began hammering them to move them home. We felt that was the lowest hanging fruit, and if we could move these people back to where we thought they should have performed in a generic sense, we knew we'd pick up a couple points. From there, we went after what we called the unallocated. These weren't necessarily undecided voters. They were just voters that we felt hadn't come all the way home yet. Again, it's kind of the next iteration of those underperformers. These were Republicans. They were leaning Republican, but they haven't yet committed to supporting the Republican at the top of the ticket. They were pretty well distributed across the state. Again, whereas in the Panhandle and North Central Florida, we felt that we were performing just fine, we still felt that there were some unallocated votes. So as we began providing these universes, what we might talk about in the southeast part of the state is completely different than what we're talking about in the Panhandle. And as we talked about those walk apps and dynamic scripting, we were able to go door to door, individual to individual, and give them a customized message through the volunteers and through the field organizers that were talking to them. Third step was then, after we've cleaned up that, try and win the remaining unallocated by a 2-to-1 margin. This isn't winning the independents 2-to-1. This isn't winning the undecideds 2-to-1. It's just simply taking the Republican-leaning people that haven't committed and getting 66% of them. We felt that was a completely attainable goal, and we knew that it would net us a couple points at the end. And then really the low-hanging fruit among the lean Democrats, which we handed over to the campaign to begin wedging away, was what we called Hillary change voters. Throughout our models over the course of the year, we identified people that leaned in the direction of Secretary Clinton, but they just repeatedly in our model showed up as wanting change from Obama's policies. So we were able to hand that up to New York, and they were able to hammer away. We felt this was the lowest hanging fruit of lean Democrats. And again, this is where parts of Southeast Florida and Hillsborough and Pinellas counties began to pop. And with that message of this is another 4 more years of the Obama policies, we were really able to wedge away some of these lean Democrats to bolster support where we needed to get across 51%. This was all fed into our television targeting. We had grids that literally broke down the entire electorate by ratings by 15-minute day part across every single network. So all the buys were able to be targeted exactly to who we thought. For example, different parts of the state would maybe want to get an underperform message, whereas there would be markets where we would want to talk to the unallocated. There would be markets where we wanted to talk to Hillary change. In fact, it could get as granular that one 15-minute day part of one network would be underperform and a different 15-minute day part of that network would be unallocated. So the teams that we worked with, Deep Root Analytics and Target Point Consulting, did a great job of helping provide us with really targeted television buys that we were able to feed over to the campaign. And as Katie mentioned earlier, we weren't making the creative, but we were using our data to hand that over to all the campaigns so they could understand exactly who they needed to talk to, what day parts they needed to buy, and what messages needed to go into those day parts to be most effective. So really the purpose of this was to turn the data into votes. So what we did, we felt that we really did a really good job of securing the underperform. Chris' team and the people in the field, the campaign, were able to get those Republicans home. The map on the left is what I showed you earlier, where we were really doing just fine in the Panhandle and North Central. By the end of the campaign, you could see we had really brought them home in Miami and Palm Beach and Broward, Hillsborough and Pinellas. We did a really good job of getting the base back, talking to them, getting a message in front of them, and more importantly, getting them to show up and vote, which was an enormous lift by Chris and his team. We also persuaded the unallocated. The left, you could see that the unallocated were pretty well distributed across the state. By the end of the campaign, the remaining unallocated voters we felt were really focused in the Miami DMA, Hillsborough, Pinellas, places that you traditionally have to swing to win Florida. So we had taken care of the low-hanging fruit. We had gotten as much as we could back heading up into the final days. We're able to hand those universes, as I'll show you, over to the campaign and allow them to really get the ball across the finish line. Here's some examples, and they're on your chair and around the room if you want to take a look. But we wanted to give you kind of a rundown of what it was like to be a voter in one of these universes. So we picked a voter, and the names have been changed, obviously, about the individuals. But we picked a voter from the Hillary Change universe, from the GOP Lean universe, and then from the Underperform universe, and followed our voter contact plans step by step as we reached out to each of them. Stephanie P., who is, I think, page 3 of the brochure, I would highlight. She received 12 mail pieces, 20 emails between August 19th and November 6th when she finally voted. So it was a pretty robust operation. We were constantly either at people's doors, in their mailboxes, on their phone, in their inboxes, on their Facebook feeds, continuously at an individually targeted level. We knew what we needed Stephanie P. to do, and we stayed on top of her until we had an opportunity to observe that she had voted, at which case we turned off the fire hose and we moved on to the next voter and began harassing them with our message until the election day. But it was a tremendously streamlined operation. There are times when, if you look through some of these voters, as soon as they voted, the fire hose was turned off and we were able to shift our attention to the next voter. By people using the API, tracking their contacts, by Liam's team, who collected all this data at a clip we'd never done in the past, we were able to make sure we weren't wasting contacts. As soon as an operation happened, we were able to move on to the next voter, get them the contacts they needed, and continue moving on. Garrett, if you want to talk about the matching for the GOTV.
So these slides concern vote.gop and how we drove people to that site to take an action, and then so that we could go secure that vote. So I think there's a lot of confusion sometimes about how online ads work. These are the 4 blocks on this slide sort of lay that out. So if you start on the left, data gives us an audience of people that we need to turn out. So they go to the voter file and they say these people need to turn out. So we take that data and then we go to all these ad networks like Facebook, Google, LiveRamp, a dozen different places, and we say, do you have these people on your networks? And because of the quality of our data and the maturation of the ad industry online, we were getting an 80% match rate. So if data gave us 100 people for this one precinct in Florida, we could target we could send an advertisement to 80 of those people in that precinct, in that turf. And so you can follow along here where we're getting an 80% match rate, and then we deliver them creative, and then they click on it and go to vote.gop. And so, next slide, where's the clicker? So on vote.gop is a shared party resource. And so people would arrive there, take an action, and then appropriate follow-up would happen, whether online or in person, or often a combination of multiple channels. And so if you're a Republican and you're running for anything in the United States, you can use vote.gop, and you send people there, and we send you the data back, and the field team helps turn them out. And so we've partnered with everyone under the sun to do that. We've sent over 700,000 actions were taken on vote.gop. 85,000 people filled out an absentee ballot application, and 63,000 looked up a voter registration form. So we talked earlier about the value of emails for raising money and winning votes. And so this really started to come to the fore in the last few months when we were driving people to vote.gop. Again, you can see here a cost of registration of 6 cents. And then the national change of address list resulted in over 22,000 registrations in our target states for an average cost of $4.24. Again, an invaluable resource the email file was to be able to take multiple kinds of different actions. So we knew we had to win Florida, so we spent a lot of focus on that state. And in Florida, over 50,000 of those actions were taken on vote.gop. In 1 week, we got over 8,000 early voting location lookups in Florida, an average cost of $10. From email and advertising efforts alone, 25,000 A/B applications. And of those 50,000 requests, 31% have already voted, and another 7% requested or been mailed on an absentee ballot. Again, part of that sort of ballet where you can do something online and then an in-person action or a phone call or another mail gets to you. And there's a circular science that goes into all that. Results.
Just pass the baton back and forth. So now I'll go into some of the results, some of the data that we saw, and how we use that to kind of leverage the final couple days in conjunction with the team up in New York with Brad Parscale and with Chris Carr to try and help get across the finish line. As I mentioned earlier, we had 13 battlegrounds that we had identified by the Friday before the election that were within 3 points. We ended up winning 9 of those 13 states. So we were very happy with our ability to really quickly turn on our data program and have the field program that was already in place and had been there for a while and begin executing it at full speed. For turnout nationally, and this was one of the things we really kind of focused on, was if we could paint the playing field correctly, if we could understand all the players on the field and turn that over to our campaigns, we felt that we would have given them a lot of information to really understand their best path to victory. Our projected turnout nationally was 135,824,656 voters. Right now, they've counted about 127 million ballots with states like California, Washington, Alaska, Connecticut still coming in. There's a whole litany down the bottom. As it's coming in, we've seen projections, and some of our initial analysis is going to have turnout between 134 and 135 million when all is said and done. So we're really confident that we will have predicted national turnout within about 1 million votes, which is very helpful when we can turn that level of accuracy over to our candidates and really have them have an understanding of who's going to vote. So we're going to continue updating this as information comes in. Give a couple examples here in Florida. Our final prediction as of Friday, our final voter score round had Mr. Trump down 2.8 points. But again, as I said earlier, this was less predictive analytics and more prescriptive. We ended up projecting turnout at 9,409,777, and actual turnout was 9,386,750. So we missed turnout in Florida by only 23,027 votes, which is about 0.24% of the total electorate. So going into Election Day, and I'll skip ahead here to a little bit, but remaining unallocated in the middle, down 2.8 points in our predictive models, but we identified 699,000 voters that we believe were the remaining undecided voters, the remaining unallocated voters in the final 96 hours of the campaign. It's about 6% of the electorate. Exit polls showed that about 7% of the electorate made up their mind in the final days of the campaign. So we're pretty confident that exactly these 699,000 people that we were talking to, that the Trump campaign was focused on, that the television buys were targeting, that digital was hitting, was the people that were making up their mind in the final days. So we were not wasting resources. We were talking to exactly the people who were making up their minds, and we knew what we needed to do to close that gap from down 2.8 to the eventual margin we had in winning Florida. We ended up only about 99,000 votes off of what we felt our predicted goal was, and some of that was made up by third-party candidates. But again, we tried to shoot high. So we were able to execute, turn out the unallocated voter in the final couple days of the election that we felt played a big role in getting us across the finish line. Michigan's another state that we saw close very, very rapidly. And again, we were really successful in our ability to predict turnout there and ultimately the final outcome. We had projected turnout in Michigan to be about 4,806,396. It was in actuality 4,789,450 with a difference of only 16,900 votes. So again, another place that we felt we had a really good understanding of the electorate, and we were walking into Election Day knowing exactly who we thought was going to vote and how to speak to them. We had us up 0.2 of a point in our model. The final margin ended up, or is currently sitting at 0.3. It has yet to be certified. But we knew there were about 485,000 unallocated voters, which again mimics a lot of what we see in the exit polls. So we knew that we had a lead. We felt very confident in it. We also knew that people were still making up their minds. And those were the people we focused on in the final days, and were able to, through Chris's operation, and again, through the great work by Brad Parscale up in New York, we're able to hold on to that lead and carry it across the finish line. It appears we're gonna end up with a win in Michigan when all is said and done. There were other places. Iowa was a great example where we knew what we needed to do to win, and we had to execute. And at the end of the day, we had our turnout off by a little bit. We had about 83,000 votes more voting in our prediction than actually showed up. But where we really feel we were successful is that we actually got really close to where we thought we needed to be to win. We were only 14,000 votes off of our vote goal. So we provided, again, Carr's team and Brad and everyone that was doing operations with exactly the votes that were making up their mind at the end of the game in the final days of the election. They executed. We hit our goals, and from all appearances, it looks like the Clinton team and the Democrats didn't show up and didn't turn out their vote. But because Chris was able to execute, because their team and Brad's team and everyone were able to get out the vote, we hit the maximum number of votes we felt we could obtain, and by being successful with our strategy, that's all we could control, and we were able to be successful in Iowa. And then we saw the same thing in Ohio. Very confident in Ohio going into Election Day. Our models have us up. Again, we had only missed turnout by about 3%, so we have a really good sense of who we thought was going to be voting in the electorate. But again, we knew there were about 527,000 unallocated voters going into Election Day. We had to operate. The Ohio team, Chris, Brad, everyone that was operating in Ohio did exactly what they needed to do. They maximized our vote goal. We ended up being off what we felt we needed to win by only 1%, and we were able to hold on to the lead and actually expand our gains because we executed, and it's possible that the other side didn't. So we have some fun facts. Katie, if you want to run through the fun facts.
Sure, Chris, I think Chris should go.
Yep, Chris.
Sure. Again, these are just the total door knocks and phone calls, and then calls to what Skelly and these guys did. The total number of calls for the voter scores, targeted mail pieces. This is what we did here for the Republican Party ticket, part of the Victory program, and then the paid GOTV phones that proved to be very, very effective, and then the emails that Garrett Lanson and team and Brad Parscale's team. Also, I just want to mention to you guys as well, we worked very closely, very well with the Trump campaign, especially out in the field. They had a small. We had daily calls, 11 a.m. Eastern every day, between the Trump state directors and our state directors. So we were always on the same page as far as executing our program. And then with Mr. Trump's travel, which was far more aggressive than the Clinton campaigns. I mean, he was going obviously to all the right places, but it was it was what the staff was able to do at these rallies. I mean, in terms of the number of registrations, the number of volunteer signups that we were doing, the absentee request at these events were. I mean, I've been involved in campaigns and presidential campaigns since 1988, and I had never seen events such as the Trump events. So the goal was, midsummer, late summer, was just to harness all that energy and plug all that manpower into our field program. And once we did all the trainings and got people involved in the turf program and bought into it, and they became neighborhood team leaders. I mean, those guys out in the field who were carrying President-elect Trump's message in the field obviously proved to be very successful, and we saw it with the turnout on Tuesday.
If there's one takeaway that I think we threw a lot of numbers out in terms of number of knocks and emails, I think the point is we have gone from a party in the last 4 years that truly understands who is voting, how they are voting, so that it's not just knocking on a door, it's knocking on the right door with the right message. And so knowing who is going to vote and how they're going to vote and when they're going to vote is what really is important, because as Bill and Chris and Garrett are all noticing, delivering the right message to the right person at the right time so they take the right action is what this all comes down to. And so I think that is what we as a party, the numbers that are important is looking at that total number of turnout, knowing that we know who was going to show up and what it was going to take to get them there is really, I think, a testament to the investment the chairman in the building and Katie and Ryan's made over the last 4 years to get us where we are now, and gave us the confidence that we had going into Election Day that we had the momentum on our side. With that, we'll take some questions.
Sean?
Yeah.
Could you use the example of Missouri in this regard? Senator Blunt was in a very close re-election campaign out there, and he had a friend of his who raised almost $1 million in his own super PAC to do voter contact somewhat himself. He was out doing voter contact and voter ID and that sort of thing. How much of that was done independently in this cycle? How much did that impacted on it? And also, can you explain how Missouri went from on your map in October or September as a swing state, then in October off the map, and in late October the Clinton campaign spent $500,000 there?
Well, yes, because luckily we have a Missouri expert. Katie's from there, spent a lot of time on different campaigns, so she is the perfect person to answer that.
Bill should join me in answering this question on Missouri. But one of the things I think is important, you talk about, I think you asked a question about a super PAC that Senator Blunt's campaign.
No,
I'm sorry,
it was a
super PAC. There was You're saying a friend?
Yeah.
Okay. My understanding, and I don't work directly with these super PACs, I can't communicate with them. What we encourage super PACs to do, and I believe every super PAC that was working in Missouri on behalf of the Republican Party did do, was work with a firm called the Data Trust, which is an outside data vendor that the RNC uses. It's the exclusive data vendor that the RNC partners with. It's the only outside data vendor that has access to the RNC voter file. And so we strongly encourage anyone that's going to get in the business of contacting voters on behalf of Republican candidates up and down the ticket to work with Data Trust. Because of our relationship with the Data Trust, they can access and get value and benefit out of the RNC voter file and everything that the chairman's invested over the last 4 years. And so my hope is that that organization worked with the Data Trust, and my inclination is that they did, but I did not work with them directly.
The question basically was, how much did that happen nationally over all the states? How much independent voter ID and voter contact was there in your estimation from what you've observed?
I mean, I think it's very hard to quantify. I mean, I don't know if Bill, it's,
The takeaway, though, is that we're the only entity that provides data to the campaigns up and down the ballot that can say, here's who you have to get at in the message. We're the only ones who do it. So other people may or may not have been out there doing some voter contact, but because the campaigns can utilize the RNC and the data and the team, they had a support center that they could call into and literally work with the people on the data team and say, okay, can you get us that new file? Who are we missing? And again, it's not polling. It's not saying, here's a subset. They're being provided names, addresses, emails of actual voters that fit into those different universes.
Bill, you mentioned longitudinal changes in tracking these data points over time. How much of an effect did the president-elect have here, and how much did that change from before he was the nominee to when the RNC started working with him, and then in the last few months?
Well, overall, I mean, there was a consolidation that happened after the primaries. Republicans began to come home, and we were able to track that by and large. I don't know that I saw any difference from maybe 12 years ago. I mean, it took Governor Romney a little time to consolidate the base as well. We saw some really good movement after the convention. We
the
saw
largest bounce in history after our convention, I think.
Yep, very large bounce after the convention. Coming into September, we started to see some of the Democrat groups begin to engage, and their numbers began to flatten out. But then by the end of October, early November, everything began moving back in our direction again pretty quickly. Really, the longitudinal changes that we were focused on was voters who started moving in our direction, but maybe stopped flat of where we thought they needed to be. So it was really used for kind of finishing, identifying people that we could finish the movement upon.
Steve, is it?
In the last few weeks of the campaign, Mr. Trump did a lot of strategic visits to places. How did you decide where he needed to go, and who made this decision of where he needed to go, and particularly talking about Michigan and Wisconsin?
I think Bill mentioned this. We're in everyday contact, and I was in New York a lot working with Brad Parscale, making sure that they had all the data that we had that showed where we thought swing voters were. I mean, ultimately it was up to, obviously, President-elect Trump, Steve Bannon, Kellyanne Conway, Dave Bossie, with the constellation of Reince Priebus, to determine the schedule. It was our job in our estimation to deliver every piece of data we possibly could. At the end of the day, the campaign is going to run the campaign that they want to run, and they obviously made some very good decisions. And we hope that our data helped in those decisions, and we believe that it did. But those were decisions made by campaign leadership.
Team CBS? I don't know, who's that? Hold on one sec.
You guys have talked about all the data you accumulated. Was there ever any security concerns or any issues that came up as this happened to the other party?
No. Here.
We obviously took enormous precautions. The weakest part of any security system are the people who interact with the software and stuff, and so that's where you start. And so we were taking precautions from the beginning of the cycle, but yeah, obviously it was a ever-present concern.
So you're saying there were no breaches?
No, not that we're aware of.
Hold on. Emily, first.
Just going back to the beginning where you guys were saying, Republicans have taken the House, the Senate, basically the Supreme Court, the White House. What's going to be your priorities moving forward?
Well, I think we're going to continue to build on this program. I think we've seen unprecedented success on Tuesday night. We'll have a special election in Virginia, and no, we won't actually anymore. We were going to prepare for that in a worst-case scenario, but I mean, we're heading into 2018. I mean, we'll have real midterms. We have an incredibly favorable map in 2018 on the Senate side. Obviously, success in the House will continue to try and grow on, although we have almost an unprecedented number of seats in the House of Representatives right now. So my understanding is the campaign and President-elect Trump are encouraging Chairman Priebus to make sure that the RNC stays on the course it's on, and invest in a data and ground game that we've spent over $175 million on.
All the way in the back. Just wait for, hold on one second, Natalie.
Thank you very much to both of you. This is kind of a double-barrel question. One is that with news that Chairman Priebus is going to be White House Chief of Staff, what are the plans to carry on this program after he has left? And the other one is, what are your plans, considering that there are 4 Democrats in the Rust Belt states that President Trump swept? What are your plans to take on those Democrats in the Senate in 2018?
I'll let Sean take the first part of that.
Which was what's his, I think, look, the RNC will have an election for its chairman, and Chairman Priebus will, President-elect Trump will have an impact on who that chairman is, as tradition has always been the case, who that chairman is. But I think that they've been wildly impressed with the operation and unequivocally already, want to make sure that it's maintained.
As it relates to Senate map, I mean, of course, we'll work closely with the National Republican Senatorial Committee to make sure, they play a large role in candidate recruitment, make sure we have quality candidates. And once we have a candidate, we're going to provide them with the tools that our candidates had this past Tuesday to make sure that they're successful.
Jane.
Hillary Clinton over the weekend blamed in part James Comey for losing both the first announcement and then the second announcement. I was just curious if you guys saw any movement along those lines, especially the second one where he basically said he wasn't continuing to review her emails.
I mean, I can tell you, I'll let Bill answer, but I think there's a lot of things that happened at the end. The disclosure from, sort of Clinton Inc., the pay-per-play stuff, the Obamacare rises, the strength of the ABEV program that Chris Carr talked about. There's a lot of factors that kind of collided at the same time in the end of this cycle. I don't know how much we can isolate one factor or another, but I think anyone would be hard-pressed to say that it wasn't one of several factors.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bill made this point too. I mean, in late October, the map shrunk substantially, and then in early November, it grew substantially. And I think the race was very fluid all the way up until the end, and so it is hard to isolate things like that.
Yeah, there was a ton of movement in a lot of these states that began in September and bounced around.
Leanne?
Are there any, do you guys have a percentage yet of voters that weren't on your radar who came out and voted for Trump?
Well, I'll let Bill talk to this specifically, but I think, just looking in Florida and Michigan, no. I mean, we predicted turnout within, 1 to 3 to 5% in worst case scenarios. So I don't think we saw a ton of voters come out that we didn't think were going to come out.
Is it in Trump voter? Is it a misnomer?
I'm not saying that I think there's a kind of a parsing of words there. Is a hidden Trump voter may be someone that didn't vote in 2012 or 2008, and that's something that we'll continue to look at. Who are folks that President-elect Trump's message really resonated with, that wanted to turn out and support the President-elect's message? But that's kind of a different question than did our data team know they were going to vote, right? Because we were canvassing the entire country, 1 out of 8 people really we talked to. And so whether or not, there was a hidden Trump voter, we may be talking about whether they voted in the past or participated in the past, but we felt like we had a pretty good handle on the voting population and who was going to turn out. Bill, I don't know if you have any.
No, I agree completely. And, the vote history data becomes available in the coming weeks, and we'll have a better analysis of the predictions from then.
I'm sorry.
Given this election result, there's been renewed talk about changing the Electoral College way of electing presidents. I wanted to get the RNC's position on the Electoral College now, and if they support states. There was also a movement in the past for states to divide up their electoral college votes proportionately. Where do you all stand on this?
I'd have to check. I think we've always deferred to states on how they want to allocate their electoral votes. I believe that's still our position. Is that it? Oh, go ahead. Noah.
There's a lot of questions now about how much Trump voters expect to the letter delivery on things like building a wall or prosecuting Hillary Clinton. You guys have looked at the data, and you're smart political people. Where do you think the electorate is expecting as far as taking him literally on some of these promises?